Show kara. Namaskar. Welcome to Himalayan Heritage Foundation. Today we are here for a very important session with a very different kind of a guest. We have been deliberating on various issues, on cultural issues, on philosophical issues, on strategic issues, and the issues on genocide. And we thought it prudent to now speak on genocide in technical terms, that how Kashmiri Pandit genocide has been denied over the years in the post-independent India, and how wrong terminologies have been used to appropriate this great human tragedy in the post-World War II. So today's theme, the denial of KP genocide, denial of Kashmiri Pandit genocide, is a very important theme in a sense that there can be no redressal or address of Kashmiri Pandit question without recognizing the KP genocide and without taking into consideration the constitutional limitations, constitutional way outs, and the international law, besides the national kind of guidelines which define these things. Is India prepared as a nation to deal with the kind of the crisis that erupted in Kashmir, that happened with Kashmiri Pandits? Are Kashmiri Pandits migrants or are internally displaced people? Is this religious cleansing or it is genocide or it's ethnic cleansing? There have been mismatch of things, lot of confusions to basically push this issue under the carpet. We have with us today a very leading luminary, leading personality, Mr. Tito Ganju. He is a constitutional expert and editor-in-chief of Epilogue, and has been one of the pioneers, I must say, in our generation, because it is he who could develop the Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Bill for the reversal of genocide. That's what was supposed to do by the Indian parliamentarians. And it's a reverse process, that it's a civil society, it's the people like him who have understood or internalized the crisis. I would go straight away to Mr. Ganju and try to understand from him what happened in 1990. We know it was a religious persecution, it was genocide, and I will go to the extent of saying that it was also democide, because state apparatus was subverted and state apparatus collaborated with the jihadis to perpetuate it. Now, Ganju Sahab, we'd like to understand from you, is Indian state right in assessing this genocide or addressing Kashmiri Pandit question? First of all, what happened in 1990, it is a Holocaust, but the way Indian political class has addressed it, it has trivialized it, it has denied it. So our question is, how actually should have Government of India address this question? I would like to understand from you. They have in NHRC report, they said it was akin to genocide. They are not signatories to IDP guidelines. They are talking of us as migrants. So how should have Indian state responded to basically address the Kashmiri Pandit question?
You see, when we talk about crime of genocide in strict legal sense, the genocide actually is a process that develops in, some theorists put it in, say that it is 8 stages, and now modern theorists talk about 10 stages, which are predictable, but not inexorable. At each stage, preventive measures can stop it. This process is not linear. Stages at times may occur simultaneously, but each stage is itself a process. Logically, later stages are preceded by earlier stages. It never happens that one stage will jump over the other. It will precede by earlier stages, but all stages continue to operate throughout the process. So the stages are like classification, symbolization, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution. Extermination is the 7th stage. which is actually termed as genocide. And the eighth stage is the denial. Now, when we're talking about crime of genocide in strict legal sense, it is definitely appalling that the past governments have purposely and persistently refrained from invoking the legal tenets of crime of genocide as per United Nations Convention. If when we're talking about 1990, when the exodus took place, post 19th January, the demands of the community for basic amenities were met with stiff resistance by the state, which ultimately became a cause of death of thousands of displaced persons between 1990 and 93. You see, this period between 90 and 93 is very important because around there's an estimation that 22 to 25,000 people died during this period. In no case can those deaths be termed as natural deaths, because you see, when a person migrates from one place to another place, willful migration, it takes 2.5 years to acclimatize to the new conditions metabolically. Here, a situation was there was a forced exodus, and tremendous, atrocities had happened. Many were killed, raped, maimed. So the conditions were not, neither feasible, not natural, and the habitat was entirely different. When we talk about the habitat, Kashmir falls in tropical region, and Jammu is is a temperate region, and Jammu is a subtropical region. So there was a climatic change also. And now it is imperative to understand that on one side, the displaced community was facing the wrath of gun yielding terrorists. They had undergone tremendous torture. These uh, these terrorists were supported logistically and morally by large population of Kashmir. Let us not forget that aspect as well. And on the other hand, the community had to face the apathy of Union of India. Now, if you see the administrative expenditure incurred by the government, mainly for payment or disbursement of ex gratia relief, it ranged from rupees 726 to I think 1247 or 50 rupees per family during the period 1995 to 1999. During this period, 450 per month per head was given to a family to the maximum of rupees 1800 per month. If you calculate, it comes to rupees 12 per head per day. And at the same time, the government was spending more than rupees 50 per head on each surrendered or arrested militant. The standard for relief to Afghan refugees in India was considerably high. And the first response of the government of India was, this very disappointing. The first response to this displacement was to deny the tragedy. The registration process for displaced persons was started by Sahayata Samiti. It was a non-governmental organization, and even the initial shelters and relief measures were started by this organization rather than by the government. When the government moved formally to register the displaced person, it was perhaps in the month of March or April. And they started providing relief and shelter. The policy projections did not go beyond few months. You see, this was amazing when the government had enough evidence with regard to international linkages to the terrorism in the state and its hold in the Muslim society of Kashmir and the entrenchment of communal forces in the social setup of Kashmir. The location of the migrant camps itself reflects that the government was what the government was contemplating. Most of the camps were actually created adjacent to watersheds and nalas. Major camps at Purkhu, Muthi, Mishriwala, Nagrota, were basically on the banks or floor beds of these nalas. And these nalas and watersheds are flooded with water during monsoon rains. It was known to everybody. This also reflects the apathy of the government, or maybe the perception that the government did not visualize that these camps may be required beyond the months of July, August perhaps, when the most monsoons would set in. And now imagine the plight of the hapless inhabitants who had to survive in these temporary arrangements meant for 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. They stayed there for 22 years. Now, I was going through the pages of a book. I think it was by Mr. Pyarelal Kohl. It was Trail and Prevail. I don't Trial and Prevail or Trail or Prevail. I don't remember the exact name. He uses the words that on gutting of some houses belonging to majority community at Handwara. Mufti Said, who was then the Home Minister of India, he visited the town. And when he was informed that these houses were torched by security forces, so these houses were actually burnt of the majority community. Sorry. When he was informed that these houses were actually gutted by the security forces, he immediately called the majority community and he it is said he has actually disowned Kashmir. He actually disowned Kashmiri Pandit. When a delegation went to meet him to actually put before him the demands of the refugee community, he said that this was not on his agenda. And what there cannot be a more glaring example of how the government of India actually responded to the genocide victims and survivors. Let us move ahead then in 1997, when Farooq Abdullah, after Sangrampura, I think it was on in March 1997, he on the floor of the assembly said Kashmir will always be a Muslim state and he will not allow the status to be diluted. So now what to talk about, it's the what more do we need to establish that the denial was not only from the part of the central government, state was also behaving as if that the Hindus of Kashmir moved out of Kashmir willfully. They actually ignored it completely. They ignored the intensity of the crime which had happened. And this has never happened, never ever. For a simple crime, you see, if somebody dies of any reason which is not natural, first thing the responsibility of the state is to lodge an FIR. Now, in our case, the state government is not even knowing the number of persons killed by militants. See, at one place they would quote 314, at other, not one place, in the assembly itself. And in the assembly itself, when this Migrant Property Act was enacted, if you go through the act, you will find an annexion and you will find that the number of killings was 719. It is the government record in the bill itself. And thereafter, many more massacres also happened. So this itself implies that not even the simple criminal procedure was followed. Because once you file an FIR, you are actually triggering the criminal procedure code. Then the criminal procedure code comes into action. In these cases, we don't know. And I tried to find out when we were working on this genocide bill, we tried to find out the number of FIRs lodged. We didn't find. The state did not respond. So if they could not respond to the killings, they have not even registered the cases. There would be some, I don't say that all the cases are not registered, but nobody knows the actual number of killings. And when we tried to find out, we actually almost found out around 2,500 killings happened during by the militants. So now you will be amazed to know that only 2 cases were handed over to CBI out of all these killings. It is Rubaiya Sayyid kidnapping case and killings of Air Force officers. They were handed over to CBI for investigation, and it's the only 2 cases that have been charge sheeted. No other killing, rape, arson. And now, when we are talking about, we're just talking about the killings. We're not talking about the harassments. We're not talking about the arson. We're not talking about the rapes. We're not talking about, molestations. They are equally serious, severe crimes, which should have been dealt, which should have been reported, which should have been acted upon. But unfortunately, nobody acted on these things. Now, when the Kashmiri Hindu approached National Human Rights Commission, if you go through the report, it was published in 1999. The term used is, it is ethnic cleansing akin to genocide. And I can tell you with confidence that 3 things, forget about the technicalities of the issue. If you actually examine only 3 things, we were termed as migrants, which we never were. Migrant is willful migration from one place to another place for economic reasons. And will is important. In our case, it was not, in any case, it was not willful. It was a forced exodus. Using of term migrant, which still is being used, there cannot be a bigger, better proof of denial of genocide than this. Secondly, now this ethnic cleansing akin to genocide by NHRC. And third is very important. The word ethnic cleansing was very intelligently, put, this lexicon was deliberately put into our psyche, so that whenever we talk about our genocide, this ethnic, we never used the genocide, except for perhaps during Margdarshan. Anand Kashmir has been using that term. Rest of us, everybody used to use this term, ethnic cleansing. This, if you go through if you understand the law, this actually relieved Government of India from all the responsibilities. If they would have accepted it as genocide, then there was a legal implication to it. There was responsibility of Government of India to undo it, and there are certain, cases which have been decided in the International Court of Justice, wherein the entire setup, what is required to be done with the genocide victims and survivors is actually enunciated. But when they use this ethnic cleansing, then they were relieved of all the responsibilities of doing anything regarding this particular issue of the genocide. So right from day one, this has been happening. Now, recently, when they imposed ban on Yasin Malik, what did they say? They said that he was responsible for genocide of Kashmiri Hindus. That is why JKLF was banned subsequently. But despite accepting it, despite recognizing it, till date, this migrant term is still attached to us. And in government parlance, this ethnic cleansing is used by and large. So one fails to understand is the rationale of previous dispensations and the current dispensation by denying genocide, which actually facilitated a vicious situation as the political class in India started incentivizing these secessionist forces to the extent that this subversive movement was even termed by some as people's movement for freedom, ignoring the fact that this so-called freedom movement unleashed itself by destroying the freedom of Hindus and everything related to Hindus. So Obviously, and let us not also forget, denial of genocide plays a role of catalyst in spreading the genocide by replicating it elsewhere. So, what we are proposing to the government of India is that, government of India is actually contractually and legally bound to bring in such a law, bring in this genocide prevention law. Till date, they have not done so. Actually, Article 5 of the convention, which India is signatory to, any country which, and it is binding on the countries to actually legislate such act in their municipal laws. India in August 1959 acceded this in the parliament, and also in pursuance to Article 51C of the Indian Constitution, which directs the state to actually foster respect for international law and treaty obligations. Similarly, Article 253 empowers the parliament to make any law for the whole or any part of the territory of India for implementing any treaty. So I don't know why still, and after even understanding the implications, why are they ignoring it? Why don't they bring in, such a law and actually start the reversal of this genocide? Otherwise, there you must have heard of many times that there is a lot of talk about restorative justice and reconciliation. You see, whosoever talks about these restorative justice or reconciliations, you see, one first thing, let me, you will then understand it in a better way. When we talk about the sources of international law, because this is actually part of international law, genocide. When we're talking about sources of international law, treaties, conventions, case laws, they are sources of customs and usages. They are sources of international law. And one more source is the opinions of the jurists. It's perhaps the only law which accepts it. That means the theories have that authority that it can be taken into consideration while creating a law, or that theory can be treated as part of the legal system. So the theorists about who have worked on the jurists who have worked on this denial of genocide and genocidal studies, they say that this sort of reconciliation and restorative justice, when we talk about genocide, it's not applicable. It will actually make this genocide permanent feature. So there is no option of, when we talk about reconciliation. Reconciliation is subsequent, post when the commission decides about the crime and it punishes the perpetrators. Thereafter, you can go for reconciliation. Yes, but that is at the end of it, not at the beginning. Right? Hello?
You beautifully explained what are the legal implications, how, as common man was understanding that there may be some hitch, you have cleared it that government of India or the Indian state is actually bound under the international laws to think in these terms and bring in legislations that can reverse a genocide. But for that, it has to accept that it's a genocide. It may be a political issue. It may be many more things can be derived out of it, whether it's vote bank politics in the broader Indian context or whatever you say. But to this day, we are being subjected to denial, and this denial is basically mostly due to misinformation also. Because as rightly you were speaking somewhere in one of the interactions itself, acclaimed journalist of the country, he understood, he internalized, and he in fact apologized for the thing that even the terms used in the local parlance were wrong. They are still being used in a wrong way. For example, you are using this migrant for Kashmiri Pandits because they are IDPs or refugees within the country. This is the wrong term. Then there you are using militant for the terrorists. That's one more thing. And Things like that. We can give plenty of examples. Now, in the present scenario, one more thing comes to the mind. You very clearly this gave a rebuttal to this restorative justice, which is basically bailing out the perpetrator, actually,
Mm.
eh?
Yes,
and with
exactly.
and putting him at par with the persecuted. That is the paradoxical kind of a thing. It's not a justice at all. I will say it's a double genocide again. So, what I would like to ask you, the way migrant has been used wrongly for Kashmiri Pandits because they are not the nomads who are going for greener pastures with their cattle or all that. I would like to understand from you, Ganju Sahab, what is it right to discuss, basically explain Kashmiri Pandit expulsion, exodus, or genocide as ethnic cleansing, as people use it frequently? How do you term it? How do you explain it? Please shed some light on this.
You see, when this convention was being drafted in United Nations, there was a debate on this, that ethnic cleansing should be included in this convention. But because of their national interests, United States and United Kingdom did not agree to it. The reason being, they were themselves involved in ethnic cleansing of the Aboriginals, so they would have never agreed upon it. So it was deliberately, kept out of the purview of this convention. When we are talking about ethnic cleansing, you see, first and foremost, in our case, we can say it was religio ethnic cleansing, if you want to use the word ethnic. Otherwise, Kashmiris as a community, if you term them, they are one ethnicity. So how was it ethnic cleansing? This was deliberately, I'm telling you, this was deliberately using, so that the government is relieved of all the responsibilities of redressing this issue. There are certain, it is not the problem of only the state government. When if you were referring to the senior journalist I was talking to yesterday only, what did he say? He said that while he was actually boarding a plane, PCC president actually told him these words. He used these terms, mujahid, and then he used this freedom fighters and all, and then he used this term militants. Tragedy with the world is that we're not able yet to define terror. Nobody, even the United Nations, has not defined the terror. And the India being the victim of terrorism from last at least 4 decades, we could have taken a lead in this, but because of the political reasons, we have not. We have never. And you will be surprised that we don't have even a anti-terror law. For that, I think we do have time. I can explain this in detail. You see, the problem of India is that we
Sure, sure.
say this is a legislative. We have a legislative supremacy, and in any country which in its constitution, this judicial review is a salient feature, it cannot be a legislative supremacy. But in our case, we put Schedule 9 and Part 4, which was not justifiable. So that made us, legislative. There was a balance was created between judicial supremacy and legislative supremacy. Because of Schedule 9 and Part 4 of the Constitution, the balance is tilted towards the legislative supremacy. Now, if we examine it in more in details, you find Article 52. Article 52 says that there shall be a president of India. Then Article 53 says all executive powers of the Union will be vested in president, which he shall exercise directly or through his subordinate office. Right? Isn't it? So all the executive powers in accordance to Article 53 are with President. Then there is Article 74, which prohibits him to exercise these powers unless he is aided and advised by the cabinet headed by Prime Minister. So the real executive is the people who are occupying the treasury benches. That is the real where the power is. All executive powers are actually vested in them, which then it is served through president, but president doesn't have a power. So when all the executive powers are with them, there are three organs of governance. One is the legislature, second is the executive, and third is the judiciary. Legislature, we all know, their main power and function is to legislate laws. Then coming to part two. Now, this is the key. When we are talking about the executive, they have the legislative powers because they are the ones who who actually bring in, who can make rules and regulations. Ordinances are it is the function of the executive. Then they execute the law. Now, third is the, if we talk about the organ, it is the judiciary. They have just to interpret law, nothing else. Now we are seeing that many at times they are intervening in everything on earth through social legislations and PILs. That's a separate issue. But when you examine further the executive, they have judicial powers also. Your settlement officer is always a DC. Your DC is always the settlement officer also. So making this executive the most powerful body. Now, Article 310 is doctrine of pleasure. They can do their, they can work till the pleasure of the president. I told you, president सिर्फ 53 में बेचारे को नाम दिया गया हुआ एग्जीक्यूटिव पावर्स उसके पास है, एक्चुअल एग्जीक्यूटिव पावर्स किसके पास है? एंड मेकिंग दिस एग्जीक्यूटिव द मोस्ट पावरफुल ऑर्गन ऑफ आवर सिस्टम. हम जो मर्जी इसमें जैसे मर्जी हम बातें करते रहे, दे आर पावरफुल बिकॉज दे एंजॉय ऑल द थ्री पावर्स. अब जब इन्हीं की बारी आ रही है तो इनका देयर बेसिक इशू इज दे हैव टू गेट इलेक्टेड. And if they have to get elected, they know the pockets where from they would get elected. That is the basic problem, that we don't have a terror law. And we are suffering from last 4 decades, right from Punjab, then to Seven Sisters, and now in Kashmir. Problem is there. And now this executive, the basic powers is with this treasury, the people who occupy the treasury benches. They delegate and subdelegate these powers to the bureaucracy, police, etc., administration. They don't have administrative officers, or bureaucracy doesn't have any inherent power. It is through delegation or subdelegation. अब दोनों साइड से पावर भी यही दे रहा है, 310 में इसकी मर्जी से ही काम करेगा. So what are you? Why are we even expecting anything from them? So that is one of the major problems, issues which we have been ignoring. अब इसमें रास्ता simple था. India needs legislative, electoral reforms, police reforms, and judicial reforms. They should have done it 30 years back. When they started with economic reforms, I think these 3 reforms were much more required than the economic reforms. Had these reforms preceded the economic reforms, economic condition would have been definitely better. We did well. I am not saying that economic reforms were not needed or required. They were needed, they were required. But these reforms should have been preceded, and most of our problems would have got solved. Secondly, we definitely need a very strong law against perjury and defamatory laws. Because now the media is actually playing a role. They are creating the narratives. They are actually occupying our minds, because they enter into our bedrooms through these electronic gadgets. Day in and day out, they are feeding us with information, and they are representing facts, which we believe that this is the fact. Unfortunately, these left factions and now Islamo left coalition has taken over the media for quite a long time. From last few years, yes, there are certain other right-wing media also coming forth. But when your voices, the government, I told you about, we know what the apathy of the government. Then who would have taken up our cause? It was the media. Media remained silent, obviously because of the editorial policy. Who was actually dictating the editorial policy? It is the same forces which actually instigated against us and got this exodus done. So it is actually a chain of events. Unfortunately, each link is not controlled by India. Rather, no link is controlled by India. When I'm referring to India, please bear it in mind, I'm not talking about Indian state. I'm talking about the Bharat, the civilizational continuity of India. So we, at that level, somewhere definitely we have failed. And we need to work on those things. The social media has given us that arm where we can use it, and we have been using it. Our youngsters have been doing tremendously well. And you must have observed the change post the advent of social media and prior to that. Now we're able to raise our voice. We're able to, convey what we think about the situation. And what we think about the situation is the real thing, because we are the victims. And responsibility of the victim is just one. He just has to tell truth. And that truth is very essential, important for the civilization. If the victims start, not talking about it, they are actually defeating the idea of civilizational continuity.
And you saw I was listening to this very carefully. Very important points. Number one, you talked about Bharat, you talked about India. Number two, you talked about the editorial policy, very right. And unfortunately, when exodus of Kashmiri Pandits took place, genocide of Kashmiri Pandits took place, we're living in an age when there was no internet revolution, there was no social media revolution, and there was total media gag because the media houses or the so-called channels, state-sponsored channels, they were controlled by cartels or you can say industrialists or whatever, and the control was beyond the shores of India that we know. Number one, and in spite of that, it's the resilience of Kashmiri Pandits that they made the world understand. It is still we have not been able to tell the world the truth about the genocide. That's why we have been lagging behind. Even 2002 Godhra or 1984 Sikh rights, they still are getting traction because they might have the lobbying and all that. But recently, when PIL was, I think, produced before the Supreme Court, and they said that we have to dismiss this case because we have no evidences. An old case like this, things like this came up in the public domain. So that is one thing. Number two is we are very clear that Indian state is in conflict with Indian nation. That is Bharat. It should have been Bharat. That is India. We understand that. Very important that we have to understand until and unless the editorial policy of the newspapers, of the journals is directed by this continuity of civilization. And I understand that the 1947, when India as a dominion was carved, or two dominions, to give Pakistan parity, it was a deliberate move to say that India that is Bharat, so that this is shown as a new nation. There is a discontinuity showed. That was the ploy. And because of that continuity, the original inhabitants everywhere in the country have been demoralized, displaced, or anything. And Kashmiri Pandits were basically the victims of this thrust because they represented the Sanskrit India and the Himalayas. Enemies knew it that if the civilizational pyramid is inverted in Kashmir, it will help to balkanize India. And that's why Indian state called the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits as law and order problem. And it didn't call it by name. That's why it's going to mainland India. What happened yesterday in the heart of the nation, New Delhi, is basically the duplication of that subversion, where in spite of the mandate, decisive mandate, the government is not able to take the subversives. That it shows Indian state and nation is in conflict. That's what we witnessed. And in this rigmarole, the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits has been trivialized, it has been sidelined. So now we have learned the lessons that there is a political consensus across left, right, and center as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, especially Kashmiri Pandits, that they will have to trivialize this genocide. Number two, so how can, as you're yourself leading a media house, you have been doing a tremendous basically job in creating a kind of new media and continuously trying to innovate in the media. What role do you see this modern media has in terms of not only highlighting genocide, but in terms of creating an ecosystem that it caters to the nation. As you rightly said, there should have been legal reforms first, then the economic reforms would have been catalyzed. So this sort of dichotomy. So media is not only a newspaper, a news agency, it's an opinion maker. It is basically it. We have seen journalists, like many journalists who were affecting policy, and it's unfortunate that over the years we have not been able to create journalists or the journalist intellectuals. And those scholars, those people who are opinion makers, journalist is an opinion maker, how do you think that this sort of ecosystem will be created in the country so that the things like that, they are preempted? The genocide like Kashmiri Pandit genocide is preempted. Daily rights are preempted. West Bengal subversion is aborted. So, what kind of role do you see for the media in the coming times now, in terms of editorial policy?
Firstly, let us understand exactly how does denial of genocide play a role, a bigger, larger role. See, uh, genocide denial is considered to be the final stage of genocide, which is built on the complex motivation, inspiring the first stage of genocide. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? It is actually built on the complex motivation, which inspires the first stage of genocide. And it represents one of the most certain indicators of future genocides. When we deny any such genocide, you see, you are actually, it moves in a circular motion. Where you think it has ended, it's actually a new start. That is why it replicates itself elsewhere also. What India did, state of India, the mistake which they committed was the basic mistake was denying this genocide. And you are seeing now that there are around not only Jammu and Kashmir but elsewhere in India, the Hindu community or other minorities are facing genocides in Kerala, whether in Bengal, even in Maharashtra or in Assam, wherever there are certain pockets, it is the first stage or second stage of the genocide. They are, first stage is the classification where you decide, where you actually distinguish between us and them. So that us and them have started. Once it is actually, it gives impetus to each other. Every stage gives impetus to other stage to move ahead. So then it moves automatically. The role the media played was, let us accept this fact that we have been blaming Pakistan every time. And we have been ignoring what India has been doing. We have been ignoring what China has to do with all this. We have been ignoring what left groups are actually doing in India. How come, left, ideologically, they are actually diametrically, opposite to each other. How are they allying together and actually working in tandem? Yesterday's event, which you rightly put it, it was an example. It did not start yesterday. It started with Shaheen Bagh. The model was allowed, and now it has established. Whatever they do now, whatever action, reaction, whatever the government of India is going to do, it will not undo what has happened. And on Republic Day itself, this is exactly what they wanted. They have achieved their goal. You may react in whatever manner you want to. The moment JNU was allowed this under the garb of freedom of speech, the anti-India sloganeering in the campus, the moment you allowed seditious elements, you actually incentivized the seditious elements. Now, if we go into the details, it is right from the independence, post this independence, if we may call it as independence, was the transfer of power from British to Congress party. You have seen the academia has been taken over, completely taken over by the left. So you will find that if you will find the textbooks, the history has been distorted, the continuation, or you will never find anything about the civilizational connect of India. You will find that Aurangzeb was a brave king who used to earn his livelihood by weaving those caps and translating Quran. That was his source of income. You will find such things in your 9th and 10th class history books, but you will never read about his the atrocities which he unleashed on other communities in India. So having said so, I don't know. I had been a teacher for a long time, and I used to actually impart training to civil service aspirants. वहां पे एक mock session होता है जो qualify कर लेते हैं. So I have attended few, not attended as a aspirant, but I was part of the system, so I was there also. वहां पे वो उनको बताया जाता था कि you don't have to say against Aurangzeb. Akbar was great. You cannot, if somebody would say that Akbar, Aurangzeb did this, such atrocities against Sikhs, against Hindus, no. If you say so, you will not be selected. If this is what we are feeding to our future bureaucracy, so where are we? How do we counter it? That they have actually, they are the system. Let us accept it. They are the system, and if you have to break the system, you have to hit them very hard. And we, through legislative processes, through electoral processes, and through creating a narrative. And they, when the entire system is, when you are running a media house, the expenditure is involved. When expenditure is involved, the only source, reasonable source is the government itself. I'm talking about Jammu and Kashmir. So you are dependent completely on the advertisement provided or given to you through information department and the government departments. Now tell me who is going to go against them? You have to create, we have to innovate new mechanisms to create our own resources to run an independent media house. Otherwise idealistically we claim about everything moral and ethical, but that's not the fact. If you do not fall in line, you are finished. You may sustain for few more months, but not more than that. So you are bound by that. The best thing about which I learned through hard way was to create different sources to run a media house. If you run a media house as a sort of a social service, without thinking that this is going to be my earning source, you may sustain. And I'm assuring, I can tell you with with confidence that it is possible. We did it. That is why we at times we do have some sort of independence. We have that independent view about everything and anything, but others may not be able to do so. Many people are involved. Employment of number of people is involved into it. There's an ecosystem. So they are bound to go by the dictates. You cannot avoid it in any case. So yeah,
Yes, please. So
so
it was very important where we have reached this point now. One thing must be understood from your this whole observation, analysis, and what you said is that we are facing a war. It's a war. Whether it's called you war of attrition or simply war, it is a war. We're in a war state. We have not been able to understand that we are in a state of war, and this war has very new dimensions, new fronts. It's not the enemy who's trying not only to dislocate you, destabilize you, is trying to annihilate you, not with weapons, which it did in 1990 or prior to that. It has reached to a new level. It has calibrated to a new level where your academia has been hijacked,
hijacked. It
Your
has
media
become
has been hijacked.
hijacked.
Your capitalist houses have been hijacked. Your governance have been hijacked. This is subversive war, number one. And in this war, it is a cost benefit war for the enemy, where it has not employed its human resource. In fact, to create a human resource from amongst us by taking over the state. So, using the instruments of the Indian state to wreck it from within. That is the very important thing we have to understand. And
Exactly.
in order to counter it, where state, then naturally you will see that state is collaborating with those people and you are on the margin. So, in such a state, you will have to reclaim yourself. You will have to create an ecosystem, as you rightly said. You will have to be like a bulwark. You need to have a system which sustains, and at the same time, it's independent of some patronage from the state. Number two, like to understand from you, in such a situation, when we see this is, I see it as an encirclement, and your narrative is choked automatically, because when state itself has been taken over in such ways, very subtle ways, microscopic ways, and as you also rightly pointed out, the left and the jihadis are supposed to be, or evangelists are supposed to be ideologically opposite. But when it comes to attack India, balkanize India, vivisect India, there is a tacit understanding they are working in tandem, and then with an understanding to share the booty. That's what I say. So, in such a situation, we call this as a basically Break India group or whatever you call. They have a collaboration outside the Indian subcontinent or in Europe, wherever you will see what the right, the Christian right or the left is doing or jihadis are doing. They may be at loggerheads. When they come to India, there is a convergence of interest to share the booty. So, in such a situation, Kashmiri Pandits are seeking justice. And yesterday's event has totally shattered the whole nation. For us, it is not a new thing. We have been witnessing these kinds of things. We have been warning Indian state. We have been warning Indian nation that look, it's not a law and order problem. The instruments of the state have been wrecked from within. And now you see a government with a decisive mandate is allowing a parallel a display, public exhibition in the minds of people. And it gives an impression that only seeking the mandate, having a decisive mandate should not be the aim. How to put it into governance? How to? This was a vote for resurgence. It was not a basically vote for development only as it's being projected. It was a vote
True.
for renaissance of the
True.
civilizational India, which has been squandered. And now, in such a challenge, in such a situation, how do you see Kashmiri Pandits talking and placing their case when we see a sort of anarchy being developed against the nation of India? Where you place the Kashmiri Pandit case, where what you see will be the future of the Kashmiri Pandit struggle from here.
You see, if you evaluate the situation right from 13th century, 14th century onwards, we have been on the forefront, decimated, killed, maimed, 7 exoduses, and a few days back when that Rahul Razdan he said, and it was actually a mathematical conclusion, that 21 generations have suffered. 21 and continually, it is continuous and continually we have been suffering. So we have been, facing the brunt of the jihad actually, and as I told you, the responsibility of the genocide survivors is to just speak the truth. Secondly, what is important is, we have been, if you see the history of jihad, no nation has survived it more than 3 decades or 4 decades. 35 years, Iran and then Persia got, decimated completely. Byzantine Empire within 12 years. We have survived. We will survive this too. We have already survived. Now the issue is understanding of the government, understanding of actually the right wing. That is faulty. That is not only, it appears at times it is retarded. You are in a war and you don't want to accept it. You try to cover it with certain ideas of growth and development, which it never was. If they have not been able to understand till now, they will never be able to understand it. That is, I don't doubt the understanding point, faculty of the thinkers of rights, who we consider as right wing. Somewhere I honestly believe that the subversion is there also. How is it possible that it's not being, people are not able to comprehend what is happening? They neutralized Article 370, abrogated Article 35A. That has been a long-term demand of Kashmiri Hindus, right? But now, once you have abrogated and neutralized, what was the necessity to bring in domicile laws? आपने एक साइड बंद कर दिया, दूसरे साइड से ले आए. किसी की डिमांड थोड़ी ना थी आपको. Nobody demanded for domicile. And then I don't know who gave them this brilliant idea of conducting DDC elections. So प्रॉब्लम कहां पे है इनकी समझ में? मैं नहीं मानता इनकी समझ में कोई इशू है. सबमर्शन कहीं देयर इज वो जिसको हम कहेंगे ना, थॉट में ही कहीं स्ट्रैंगुलेशन है जो पॉलिसी मेकर्स. नाउ टेल मी, यस्टरडे का आप इवेंट देख ले, हमारे साथ तो रोज ही हो रहा है पिछले 30 साल में, 30 into 12 into 7 रेगुलरली हो रहा है. They knew it 15 days पहले. They knew what the plan is all about. How did they allow? Who is actually, मुझे समझ ही नहीं आ रही है. सामने मुझे लगता है at times, and I wish I am proven wrong, सामने हमें लगता है कि प्रधानमंत्री चला रहे हैं, बट हुकुम कोई और ही चल रहा है. This is not even statecraft. This is not good for them also. अगर आप चाइना आर्मी का मैनुअल पढ़ेंगे, you will find 3 things. You must have gone through, you have done a lot of work on China. 3 पॉलिसीज उन्होंने दी है. 1, invest into corporates. Through these corporates, take over the media. And 3rd, create human rights groups. That is their easiest way to subvert. Whether they do it in America or in India, they have been doing it. So, and it is part of the army manual of China. So if I could find it, what is mentioned in their, handbook, what is our government doing? They must be knowing much prior to what we know. They have the mechanism, they have the agencies to do so. But there is somewhere that at the policy making, subversion is, there is no doubt. Otherwise, it doesn't fit in. How can you come up with an idea of abrogating Article 370, neutralizing Article 370, and then Article 35? Reason, what are you giving? It is for growth and development, peace and prosperity. Hey, by India, Jammu Kashmir was 5th, much higher in grading than Gujarat. ये कौन सी बातें आप कर रहे हो इसकी? हाँ, it was discriminating. It was creating a Muslim state in India. It was actually facilitating the anti-India subversions. But वो खत्म करके आप domicile क्यों ला रहे हो? And you will be amazed to know there's a notification from Home Ministry that state subject is not required for transfer of property. आप जाके आज किसी एसडीएम के पास रजिस्ट्रेशन के लिए जाए, इट इज द मैंडेटरी. जब तक स्टेट सब्जेक्ट होगी तब तक आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं होती है, डिस्पाइट नोटिफिकेशन फ्रॉम होम मिनिस्ट्री. तो क्या कहेंगे आप? तो यहाँ पे गवर्नेंस लेवल पे भी सबवर्जन है. एंड आई थिंक द गवर्नमेंट शुड हैव, द करंट डिस्पेंसेशन शुड हैव वर्कड ऑन द लेजिस्लेटिव एंड दीज रिफॉर्म्स, पुलिस रिफॉर्म्स, ब्यूरोक्रेटिक रिफॉर्म्स एंड judicial reforms. You see, even the judiciary, what are they doing? Just say you quote, you said about the incident when that this was moved in reopening of cases of Kashmiri Hindu killings.
Yes, exactly.
It should have, they are taking so much actions on every case. If they could open Supreme Court during night for that guy who was actually awarded the death penalty, Menon, Yaqub Menon. इसमें क्या था? And if you see from 2000 to 2020, and I want you, please do it. Check out in which cases they have taken a suo motu action. And at the same time, what else, similar circumstances, situations, why haven't they taken a suo motu action? What is the reason? So subversion is at a, now it has taken over almost, but our responsibility, we have fought it for 700 years. We cannot let our ancestors, our martyrs, we cannot let them down ever. So we will be contesting wherever, however, in whatever manner we can, we will be doing it. And I believe that our responsibility is to just, speak the truth. What is happening, what has happened, and why it has happened.
So you beautifully put it that we have hope against hope, actually. And
No.
subversion.
Let me tell you, we are the hope. बाकी लोग surrender कर चुके. We are the only hope.
That's the correct thing. So, what is there basically happening? You rightly said that subversion has taken over at different levels that we're talking about. And now this domicile, in spite of the fact. So, now you have raised this question. I would like to ask you, after the reorganization of the Jammu and Kashmir state, what do you see that they would have taken this reorganization to next level if they would have been serious about the rehabilitation of the Kashmiri Pandits, the policymakers, I say. So what Kashmiri Pandits have been demanding, even the people of Jammu have been demanding for a state, for the freedom from separatism, actually. It's not basically the separatists or the jihadis who need the freedom. It's the non-Muslim minorities of this erstwhile princely state who need freedom. This is basically regression which is being supported. Now, how do you see should have been the logical corollary of this reorganization if they would have been, you can say, on certain, you can say, pragmatic terms in reconciling to the fact that justice has to be delivered to the minorities of this state and given a mandate to have the safety of their life and limb. So was there a chance they could have done this once for all, a complete reorganization of the state? And if there was one union territory of Ladakh for, I think, 2 lakh people, why not a union territory for, we can say, so many lakhs of Kashmiri Pandits? I think, keeping in exodus, we are more than 10 lakh all over the world. And was it not logical for such a volume of people to be accommodated in a union territory in Kashmir? It would have been quite easy now. There was no hitch. What do you say about it?
You see, creation of a union territory, carving out a union territory, which we call as Pan Kashmir, is a necessity. It's imperative. If they have to retrieve Kashmir, if they have to put an end to these continuous genocides, it is the only way out. It is the imperative necessity for state of India and for nation of India as well. The problem is that, when you must have heard it, it was in the media also, that at that time, the state machinery and, there was a report which was accepted by Satyapal Malik that thousands will get killed. Nobody got killed. Now imagine the level of, the reporting which people are actually, this is the kind of subversion we are involved in. So understand this. What government could have done, you see, unless, if you examine the entire situation through this prism of geopolitical strategy, it is necessity. If you have to, not allow the Himalayas to get Islamized, you have to create a foothold, geopolitical foothold in the hinterland. And you have to strengthen Shivalik Plains means Jammu. Otherwise, you don't have any choice. There is no other way. Otherwise, this will continue for, maybe next 100 years or so. Why did they do it? One, I believe that there was a subversion at the, intelligence level also. who had suggested that thousands would get killed, and so far nobody has died. And then the basic fault in the though legally they could not have done anything else. I'll explain that in detail. You see, reorganization is to be done on the basis of 2011 election, 2011 census. The number is already in favor of Kashmir, right? 14 lakh. Now we know that it was a sham. It was not a census. In any case, even if you calculate the birth rate and the death rate from 71 election, don't go by 81 because again there was an exaggeration in that. Go to 71 elections or even beyond that. Now calculate birth rate and death rates of Jammu as well as Kashmir. Move out Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir to other parts of India. Now calculate it is mathematically it is not possible that there would be 14 lakhs more than the population of Jammu. In 1951, we should know this background. 1951, Sadr Riyasat Karan Singh ji issued a proclamation for delimitation. And this delimitation was declared that the order suggests, the proclamation suggests, it's an order, for every 40,000 population, one, constituency will be carved out. The 1941 and 1961, 1951, the census could not take place. If we take the mean of 1941 census and mean of 1960, both the means of 41 census and 61 census, Kashmir should have 62,000. So let us be very liberal, 82,000 population more than Jammu. They should have got 2 more seats than Jammu. They got 13 seats more than Jammu. So the basic discrimination started from there, and it is continuously happening till date. I don't know why people are not talking about it. Question is not of now. Imagine now that in accordance to the Reorganization Act, 9 seats have been increased, isn't it? 5 will go to Kashmir and 4 to Jammu. The gap has further, it has actually gone in favor of. It has increased. It has widened. 1 more seat to Kashmir. Why are they doing it? I don't know why. You can't. You don't have a justification. It is not logical. It is not even even a a 10th class student would at least be able to do justice to such things. What are they doing? Who are these policy makers? I fail to understand. More importantly, what is their intention? That is more important. And if we have to get rid of these things, I am firm, I believe in this. Unless we have these reforms, nothing is going to change in India. You will never be able to do anything. You have to break this, and how could you break it? It's not that easy because they are controlling. As I told you earlier also, that the entire constitutional system is such that this group of people, they would never allow. It is not important who the person is. Now, it is a system. Breaking into the system, you need an extra power to, break it. For us, yes, again, we are contesting and we will be contesting it. And hopefully, whatever is happening around India now, particularly since yesterday, I don't think the government of India has a choice but to enact this genocide bill and subsequently create a, what we call as Panan Kashmir. There is no other choice.
Exactly.
There is no logical, choice. Even if you even analyze it critically, you would find a better solution than this. And now imagine, we have been saying it actually the idea was floated on 28 December 1991, which they are not still able to comprehend. So jo main keh raha hu na, we are the only hope. So we should actually stick to our grounds.
Exactly. You have underlined a very important point. Now, I would like to say, till some time, we had been saying that Margdarshan resolution passed unanimously by the community across the political spectrum. You will be amazed to know that people who were basically called so-called ultra seculars, they
mm,
also jumped the gun, and those people who had faith in so-called coexistence, they realized after crossing the Java Tunnel what has happened to us. We were supposed to be in their lap, but they came to know that it's only the Margdarshan which addresses the every aspect, constitutional aspect, geographical aspect, economic aspect, religious aspect, or the civilizational aspect, and also forewarns the nation of India, the nation, Indian state, that this is going to happen. The draftsmen or the fathers, founding fathers of the Margdarshan resolution were, you can say, full of foresight, and we can see everything happening. If this homeland would have been carved some 15 years back, we would have seen basically insulation of this subversive march to the mainland India. This Margdarshan resolution has two things. First, it may have been a document. It is a document, in fact, to reverse the genocide, but it's also the document to reverse the subversion which has penetrated the Indian state.
exactly,
That
exactly,
is very important. It's not
exactly.
only the reversal genocide
Very
document,
true.
but the reversal of subversive document. And most important, enemy knows it,
Mm,
that by dislodging Kashmiri Pandits, they have dislodged India from the northern frontier. They have
mm,
made a breach into the northern frontier.
very true.
And now that the onward march of these forces, whether this is Chinese imperialism, Islamic Jihad, or evangelical intrusions, I am not talking another factor, that is the Soros Foundation, how it's engineering subversion into it. This will go beyond the scope of this discussion, and how this northern frontier is being attacked in pincer in tandem. So, do you what do you say now? The way the things are developing, that Parliament has been held hostage in spite of having the majority by the ruling dispensation. What kind of political atmosphere you will, if does this, what has happened yesterday actually, will it impact the decision making on Jammu and Kashmir? Because what happened yesterday, it was not only Khalistanis or left liberals, it had the jihadi support. It was Shaheen Bagh
It was,
2.0,
it was, it was,
Shaheen
yes.
Bagh 2.0, a model, as you rightly said. They have succeeded. Basically, what is going on, that they are using the Indian flag to get a cover to do subversion. First,
Cover.
basically, Indian flag is a cover to subvert, and under it, they are using anti-India activities, and they use it as a catalyst to subvert and then impose the agenda. It happened during the Anna agitation, and it happened in Shah. I see it beyond that. What happened in Shaheen Bagh was the outcome of so-called anti-corruption movement, which was led by subversives. So, what do you have to say on it?
Very true. What we lack is the grit of the government, the state. State is not exhibiting its power, and if the state is not able to exhibit its authority, what sort of a state it is? You know, there cannot be more disturbing a situation than people taking over Lal Killa on the day of Republic. And this is a breach of serious breach of security as well. I don't know why they were even allowed to do so, how they were able to assemble in different parts of Delhi, then move out of that. There is definitely, there are subversives within the system. Subversives have they have taken over the system. And if but one thing I'm hopeful about is that probably that is the only the silver lining in this all in this entire events is that by and large people of India have started understanding what has happened. That is the that is something which brings actually generates hope, that people have started understanding, people are objecting to what is happening. Maybe probably if such a if we are able to manage and make people more aware and create a narrative, and ultimately let me tell you, perception is very important. This narrative building is really important if we have to undo what has been done. Problem here is that in the narrative building exercises, we are lacking behind somewhere, but we have to gear up for that. We have to match the pace, the the pace and the expertise with which the enemy, and we have to externalize the enemy. There's no other choice. We have to identify, externalize the enemy. ये जब तक आपको ये शत्रु बोध नहीं होगा, आप नहीं कर पाएंगे. You are, as we know, Kashmiri Pandits know, we are in a war. Rest of the India is not accepting it as a war. And if you are not accepting it as a war, whatever measures you are going to take, they will never bring forth any fruitful results or the desired results. You have to understand, yes, this is a war, and then you can strategize accordingly. More importantly, we have to, we don't have this, we can't wait much for a longer period anymore, because the subversion is within the system, our parliamentary system, our executive system, everywhere they have taken over. So it is very important that we keep an eye on everything what has happened, right from policy making to its execution. RTI is one such power which was, incidentally or accidentally provided to the to the citizens of India. We need to and that gives you, you that gives the reason to your understanding what is happening, and there is a subversion. We have to counter that. There's no other choice. And yes, one more thing I want to add. If they do not act now, perhaps they won't get another chance to undo what has been done. Maybe they might come back into government with a bit narrow margin or even more. If they don't act now, they won't be able to act ever. You see, they are challenging. This is a challenge to the parliament. It is not challenge to the state or the state union government. It is challenge to the parliament, and act has been passed by the parliament, and they are challenging that very act. Under that garb, they are challenging your republic. They are challenging your parliament also. They are going to get our parliament on 1st of February. So if the parliament is being challenged, your symbols are being challenged, what are we heading towards? It's an anarchy. We have to counter it, and we have to counter it with iron fist. It cannot be dealt with, soft gloves. It cannot be.
Ganju Sahab, you really built up the case for genocide. You traced its antecedents, how it was trivialized, how subversion has basically catalyzed this genocide. Subversion has catalyzed the denial of genocide. And now you have summed up, you have brought to the fore how actually we are fighting this war on our own, and how we have sensitized not only ourselves, our community, but the entire nation. Now the ball is in the court of the Indian political class. They have to understand it. The same thing was done by one of the illustrious sons of the community and one of the leading political scientists, Professor Mohan Krishan Teng, and how he opened the eyes. But his books like Northern Frontier were banned in infancy and things like that. So again today, we are playing that civilizational role, all of us, and collectively, and now the force has been multiplied. And as you rightly said, truth has to be told exactly for the people who have been subjected to genocide. You cleared the myths. Many cobwebs were removed by your very enlightening discourse. And with this, I hope that the new situation that has emerged, this was basically the situation Kashmiri Pandits had warned, that this anarchy, this subversion will hold the Indian nation to ransom.
Yes.
And we have been proved right again. We were proved right then also. And we'll be keeping on upholding the Indian nation, the Sanskrit tradition of Indian nation. The role of Mardarshan is to reverse genocide, to reverse this subversion, and to re-Sanskritize the northern frontier, which have been doing with our sacrifices, with our civilizational cultural contributions. And Jammu and Kashmir is not only integral part, it's the nervous system which has been basically hit And this nervous system has been hit with the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. That's why the limbs of India are paralyzed today. This paralysis, which has caught the nation in policy paralysis, governance paralysis, will be reversed only when Government of India, the Indian state, realizes it's the importance of northern frontier. And in this northern frontier, the role of Kashmiri Pandit not only as the senator, but as the seed and anchor of the Sanskrit civilization of India. Thank you very much, Tituji, for
Thank
this
you so much.
wonderful, enlightening discourse and putting it in legal and you can say most contemporary perspective. We are highly grateful to you. Thank you so much, sir. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Manoj. Thank you so much.